true. Nervous. Very, very dreadfully nervous. I had been and am. But why will you say that I'm mad? The disease had sharpened my senses, not destroyed, not dulled them. Above all was the sense of hearing acute. I heard all things in heaven and in the earth. I heard many things in hell. How then am I mad? Hearken and observe how healthily, how calmly I can tell you the whole story. It is impossible to say how first the idea entered my brain, but once conceived, it haunted me day and night. Object there was none. Passion there was none. I loved the old man. He had never wronged me. He had never given me insult. For his gold I had no desire. I think it was his eye. Yes, it was this. One of his eyes was like that of a vulture, a pale blue eye with a film over it. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold, and so by degrees, very gradually, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man and thus rid myself of the eye forever. Now this is the point. You fancy me mad. Madmen know nothing. But you should have seen me. You should have seen how wisely I proceeded, with what caution, with what foresight, with what dissimulation I went to work. I was never kinder to the old man than during the whole week before I killed him. And every night, just at midnight, I undid the latch of his door and opened it, oh, so gently. And then, when I had made an opening sufficient for my head, I put in a dark lantern, all closed so that no light shone out. And then I thrust in my head. Oh, you would have laughed to have seen how cunningly I thrust it in. I moved it slowly, very, very slowly, so as not to disturb the old man's sleep. It took me an hour to place my head within the room, so far that I could see him as he lay upon the bed. Would a madman have been as wise as this? And then, when my head was well within the room, I undid the latch. Cautiously. Oh, so cautiously. Cautiously, for the hinges creaked. I undid it, just so much that a single thin ray fell upon the vulture eye. And this I did for 7 long nights, every night, just at midnight. But it was impossible to do the deed, for the eye was always closed. And so it was not the old man that vexed me, but his evil eye. And every morning when the day broke, I went boldly into his chamber, calling him by name in a hearty tone, and inquiring how he had passed the night. So you see, he would have been a profound old man indeed, to have suspected that every night, just at midnight, I looked in upon him while he slept. Upon the 8th night, I was more than usually cautious in opening the door. A watch's minute hand moves more quickly than did I. Never before that night had I felt the extent of my powers, of my sagacity. I could scarcely contain my feelings of triumph. To think that there I was, opening the door little by little, and he, not even to dream of my secret deeds or thoughts. I fairly chuckled at the idea, and perhaps he heard me. for he moved upon the bed suddenly as if startled. Now you may think I drew back, but oh no. No. You see, the room was as black as pitch, filled with a thick darkness, for the shutters were closed, fastened through fear of robbers. And so I knew he could not see me entering the room. And so I kept pushing on steadily. When my head was well in the room, I desired to undo the latch. But suddenly, my thumb slipped upon the tin fastening, and the old man sprang up in the bed, crying out, "Who's there?" I kept quite still and said nothing. For a whole hour, I did not move a muscle. And in the meantime, I did not hear him lie back down. He was still sitting up in the bed, listening, just as I had done night after night, hearkening to the death watches in the walls. Presently, I heard a slight groan, and I knew it was the groan of mortal terror. It was not the groan of pain or of grief, oh no. It was the low, stifled sound that arises from the bottom of the soul when overcharged with awe. I knew that sound well, too. Many a night, just after midnight, when all the world slept, it had welled up within my own bosom, deepening with its dreadful echoes the terrors that distracted me. I say I knew it well. I knew what the old man was feeling, and I pitied him. Although I chuckled at heart. I knew he had been lying awake ever since that first light noise when he had turned in the bed. His fears had been ever since growing upon him. He had been trying to fancy them causeless, but he could not. He had been saying to himself, "It is nothing but the wind in the chimney," or "It is a mouse crossing the floor," or "It is merely a cricket that has made a single chirp." Yes, he had been trying to comfort himself with these suppositions, but he had found them all in vain. All in vain. Because death, in approaching him, had stalked with his black shadow before him and enveloped the victim. And it was this unperceived shadow that caused him to feel, though he neither saw nor heard, to feel the presence of my head within the room. When I had waited a very long time, very patiently, without hearing him lie back down, I resolved to open a very, very little crevice in the lantern, and so I opened it. Oh, you cannot believe how stealthily I opened it, until at length a single thin ray, like the thread of a spider, shot out full from the crevice and fell upon the vulture eye. It was open. It was wide open, and I grew furious as I gazed upon it. I saw it in perfect distinctness, all a dull blue with a hideous veil over it that caused the very marrow in my blood to run cold. But I could see nothing else of the old man's face or person, for I had directed the ray, as if by instinct, precisely upon that damned spot. And so now there came to my ears a low, dull, quick sound, much the sound as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I knew that sound well, too. It was the beating of the old man's heart. It increased my fury as the beating of a drum stimulates a soldier into courage. But even yet, I refrained and kept quite still. I scarcely breathed. I held the lantern motionless. I tried to maintain how steadily I could keep the ray upon the vulture eye. Meantime, the hellish tattoo of the heart increased. It grew quicker and quicker, and louder every instant. The old man's terror must have been extreme. It grew louder, I say, louder! Do you mark me well? I told you I'm nervous, and so I am. And now, at this dead hour of the night, amid the dreadful silence of that old house, so strange a sound as this excited me to uncontrollable terror. But for many moments the heart beat on. It grew louder and louder and louder. I thought the heart must burst. And now a new anxiety seized me. The sound, it would be heard by a neighbor. With a loud yell, I threw open the door and leapt into the room. He shrieked once only. In an instant, I dragged him to the floor and pulled the heavy bed upon him. I then smiled gaily to find the deed so far done. But for many moments, the heart beat on with a muffled sound. This, however, did not vex me. It would not be heard through the walls. At length, it ceased. The old man was dead. I placed my hand upon the heart. I held it there for many moments. Yes, he was stone dead. His eye would trouble me no more. If still you think me mad, you will think so no longer when I describe to you what wise precautions I took for the concealment of the body. The night waned, and I worked hastily, although in silence. First of all, I dismembered the corpse. I cut off the head and the arms and the legs. I then took up 3 boards from the flooring of the chamber and deposited all between the scantlings. I then replaced the floorboards so cleverly, so cunningly, that no human eye, not even his, would have detected that anything was wrong. There was nothing to wash out, no blood spot, no stain of any kind. I had been too wary for that. A tub had caught all. When I had made an end of these labors, it was 4 o'clock, still black as midnight. As the bell sounded the hour, there came a knocking at the street door. I went downstairs with a light heart, for what had I now to fear? There entered 2 men who introduced themselves with perfect suavity as officers of the police. A shriek had been heard by a neighbor during the night. Suspicion of foul play had been aroused. Information had been lodged at the station, and they, the officers, were deputed to search the premises. I smiled, for what had I now to fear? I bade the officers welcome. The shriek, I said, was my own in a dream. The old man was away, absent in the country. I took my visitors all over the house. I bade them search well. At length, I brought chairs into the room and desired them here to rest from their fatigues, while I myself, in the wild audacity of my perfect triumph, placed my own seat precisely upon the spot beneath which reposed the corpse of the victim. The officers were satisfied. My manner had convinced them. They were singularly at ease. They sat, and while I answered cheerily, they chatted of familiar things, but ere long I felt myself getting pale. My head ached, and I fancied a ringing in my ears. But still the men continued and smiled and chatted. The ringing became more distinct. It continued and became more distinct. I talked more freely to get rid of the feeling, but it continued and gained definitiveness until I realized that the sound was not in my ears. No doubt I now grew very pale, and yet what could I do? It was a low, dull, quick sound. Much the sound as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I gasped for breath, and yet the officers heard it not. I arose and argued about trifles in a high key and with violent gesticulations, but still the noise steadily increased. Why would they not be gone? I paced the floor to and fro with heavy strides, as if excited to fury by the observation of the men, but the noise steadily increased. Oh God, what could I do? I foamed, I raved, I swore. I swung the chair upon which I'd been sitting. I grated it upon the floor, but the noise steadily increased over all. It grew louder, louder, louder. and still the men smiled pleasantly and chatted. Was it that they heard not? Almighty God, no, 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 no. They heard. They suspected. They knew. They were making a mockery of my horror. This I thought, and this I think. But anything was better than this agony. Anything was more tolerable than this derision. I could bear their hypocritical smiles no longer. I felt that I must scream or die. And now again, hearken, louder, 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 louder! Villains! Dissemble no more! Tear up the planks! Here! Here! It is the beating of his hideous heart!